Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off because today I'll be reviewing and paging through Sigil and Shadow from Osprey Games. Is this lightweight role playing game of urban fantasy and horror deserving of a spot in your collection? Or if you purchase Sigil and Shadow, will you feel as if your money just went up in smoke? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, today I'll be reviewing Sigil and Shadow from Osprey Games. But first, I do want to mention that we're in the midst of the Gaming Gang October Spooktacular 2021. And that means each and every day you're going to find a brand new tabletop gaming related video on thegaminggang.com, or of course, here on the Gaming Gang YouTube channel as well. Now, that might be a first look video or a review, such as today's video, or if it's Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, it's going to be an episode of my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, where I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news, as well as first looks at tabletop games. And of course, do want to also point out that at 9 p.m. each and every night this month, you'll be able to find a spooky old-time radio show that I'm hosting over on thegaminggang.com. So there's plenty going on for the month of October. And if you enjoy Halloween, you're going to enjoy what we've got cooking at thegaminggang.com. All right, that said, today I am going to be reviewing Sigil and Shadow from Osprey Games. It is written by R.E. Davis with artwork provided by Luis F. Sands. This 208-page digest-sized hardcover does carry an MSRP of $35. You can grab the PDF over from our friends over at DriveThruRPG for $24.50. So let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got Sigil and Shadow. Couple of things before we dive in. First off, the fine folks over at Osprey Games and Osprey Publishing were kind enough to provide me with this review copy of Sigil and Shadow. But neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share my thoughts about this game with you. These days, it's important that you know that. Also, I'm going to stay picture in picture up here in the left corner. That means I'm going to be cutting off a little bit of the upper left corner of the book. We are not going to take a look at each and every page of the book either. I just want to give you kind of a high-level feel for this game, talk about what I like, what I'm a little confused by, and what I may not be all too keen about with Sigil and Shadow. So let's jump on in. Something I do want to mention right off the bat is I really do like these digest-sized hardcovers that Osprey Games has come out with. And they've got quite a few different role-playing games and miniatures games that are presented in this. I want to say this is A5 digest size. As we jump on in, this is a D100 based game, kind of a D100 light. And I know a lot of people out there are going to think, oh, this is inspired by Call of Cthulhu or basic role-playing from Chaosium. That's not the case. It actually draws inspiration from bare bones fantasy. I thought that was kind of interesting because first thing I would have thought, taking a look at this and knowing that it's a D100 system, is no. Usually, if it's a percentile system, it owes a nod at least to RuneQuest, if not basic role playing or Call of Cthulhu. You're going to notice there's artwork throughout. There's not a ton of artwork. And as with most urban fantasy or urban horror role playing games, the artwork is a little more mundane than you're used to seeing with other, say, high fantasy role playing games. The artwork is fine. I like the artwork. It just doesn't hold a ton of visual pop. Just want to mention that, which is fine. This is not a high fantasy role playing game. This is a rather rules light game as well, I should point out. All you're going to use are D10s. And one aspect that I do like with the game mechanics, and we've seen this with some of the other role playing games from Osprey Games, is of course in a percentile system, you're looking to roll lower than your attribute or skill, what have you. In this system, if you roll below and you roll doubles, that's kind of a critical success. But if you roll above and roll doubles, then that's a critical failure. There's also advantage. Advantage is a little bit different than what people are used to seeing in a percentile system, as opposed to rolling two dice that represent a choice of the tens, either good or bad. In this, what you do is if you have advantage and you roll the dice, you can actually swap the numbers around. So if you roll, say, a 91, you could change that to a 19 if you've got advantage. If you have disadvantage, that 19 becomes a 91. I like how that works. So we've got action checks are kind of the key component, the key rule to this, which is essentially just rolling percentile dice. We've got bones. Bones are kind of like bennies and fate points that you can utilize not only during gameplay, but also during your character creation. Character creation is pretty easy. It moves along pretty quickly. There are two sorts of characters in this game. We have the illuminated, who are essentially just regular people who have been exposed to this hidden secret world, just beyond, and have been changed by it. And then we also have shadowed, where the shadowed are more along the lines of you're playing monsters. So if you are a fan of games along the lines of Vampire the Masquerade or Werewolf the Apocalypse, but maybe you don't care for their game mechanics, this might be something that you want to take a peek at. So we've got some archetypes. We don't have tons of archetypes. There's like 4 archetypes for each of the illuminated as well as the shadowed. And as you can see, there's just a little bit of info just to kind of get you started. And that is one of the things throughout this book you'll find is that there are some aspects of this game, especially magic, that is really left up to the players and the guide. And the guide is this game's equivalent of a game master. And that's actually something I wasn't too keen on. And I'll talk about that when we get to the magic section. So one way that you can earn these bones is by role playing to your drive. So as an example, a seeker, their drive is discovery. The hunter, their drive is victory. The keeper, their drive is conspiracies, solving conspiracies, diving into conspiracies. The protector's drive is to be a safeguard. Then we have the shadowed. So we've got the afflicted, the devoted, the host, as well as the ravenous. As I mentioned, these are just sort of archetypes. You can come up with your own archetypes as well. You are not just locked into these 8. We do have backgrounds and oddities to give your characters a little more customization. So we've got that. We have skills. Now, the skills aren't extensive. There's 10 different skills. And you'll also kind of drill down to, especially with particular skills, like for an example, technology is one of the skills. Well, you're actually going to have a feature for technology. You're not just going to sit there and be like, well, technology, so it's everything. My character's great at programming computers and hacking computers and biosciences, string physics. No, That is not string theory. I should say physics. That's not the case. You actually have to drill down. We do have some character backgrounds as well. We have oddities. Some of those are kind of interesting. And then we've got our abilities. We've got our attributes, and there are four. We have strength, dexterity, logic, and willpower. So those are the four. And you're going to start off with 40 points in each. And then you'll have 50 points that you can break up to increase those four attributes. Combat is pretty simple. We'll get to that in just a bit. Here are the skills. Once again, as I mentioned, we've got the focus fields, and we have 10 different skills. We have perks as well. Special powers, derivative traits, the bone pile. The bone pile is essentially kind of discussing how to use those bones in different aspects of the game. Something else that I thought was kind of interesting is we've got sort of equipment packs depending on your character's background. So you're not sitting there going through the process of having to purchase all this equipment and things like that. It's kind of telling you, hey, this is effectively what you're going to have. And of course, with the player and the guide, you can decide what other items your player character has access to. Character advancement is not real in depth. In fact, there's really a milestone system, right? So you can use experience points actually to better your die rolls, that's something I found to be kind of interesting. And we have character ranking, but we've got milestones, sort of like we see with Dungeons and Dragons, as well as Pathfinder. If the game master feels, hey, you know what, you've now gone up in rank, then you go up in rank. Funny enough, though, there's not a lot of discussion about how to go about doing that. So we get into the actual meat and potatoes of the game itself. As I mentioned before, what you're looking to do is you're looking to roll lower than. Something else I think is kind of interesting, and this is what shows up in this like D100 Lite system for Osprey, is if you have a contested task, you're going up against somebody else. So what happens is you have to roll under your challenge. So let's say it was using strength. And of course, there are some modifiers if something's difficult, if something's easy. But if you're rolling, say, under a particular like attribute, what have you, it's really interesting because you want to roll closer to your actual total, to your number. So for an example, if you have 45 and you roll a 42, you will beat somebody who, say, theirs was 50, but they rolled a 25. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's a little different. It does take a little getting used to, especially if you are somebody who is used to playing with Call of Cthulhu or basic role playing or some more traditional percentile dice systems out there. Combat's pretty easy. You can take an action. You can take multiple actions, but you get a penalty for that. One thing I thought was kind of cool too is if you roll a critical, you can either do double damage, and combat in this is pretty deadly, which it should be. I mean, we're talking modern weapons and monsters with fangs and claws tearing you apart. But if you roll doubles, you can either double your damage, if you, of course, if it's a success, then you roll doubles, or you'll dole out an injury, and it kind of talks a little bit about injuries as well. I thought that was cool. I like that. I really do like that aspect. We have conditions and things like that. Here we go, the contested tasks that I was talking about, where it's still roll under, but closest to it. We've got a little bit of info about vehicles and vehicle chases that not super, super detailed. There's certainly nothing like the chase mechanics for 7th edition Call of Cthulhu. that some people love and other people dislike. So we get into metaphysics and mysticism. So about a third of the book is going to be devoted to this, which you would expect because this is an urban fantasy, urban horror role-playing game. There's like little bite-sized nuggets within this that kind of breaks down a lot of different kind of supernatural abilities. Once again, keeping in mind that there is magic in this game world. Here's the shadowed. We get a discussion about how to create a shadowed character because, of course, a shadowed character is going to have far more access to these supernatural powers as well. Now, one of the things I'm going to jump through a bunch of this because there's quite a lot in here, and it's all different genres as well. But one of the things with magic, I thought I'm not a huge fan of is the fact that as far as magic goes, there's really no grimoire. There's no big list of magic spells, which would have been great even if they were only a couple of sentences to describe those magic spells. In Sigil and Shadow, the player and the guide are supposed to kind of get together and discuss, different spells and kind of create their spells together. And I got to be honest, knowing role players as I do, I think in theory that sounds much better than it actually is in execution. Because most players want to just have, okay, so here's a spell list. I can pick what I want or get an idea of what I want, and I'm ready to play. Not, I got to sit down with the game master and we got to figure things out and hash things out. And maybe I want something one way and the game master or guide doesn't want to go in that direction. I think it's going to, you're going to expend a lot of energy for a limited payback or payout. In my opinion, it's once again, just my opinion. I do like the discussion about coming up with ideas for spells. I like that aspect. I like this inverted pyramid that kind of breaks things down for you as well. Now, we will get some example spells, but very few. And of course, we have different types of spells as well, having to do with the elements and things like that. You have summoning spells. Here's the sample spells. So we have air, water. I was going to say land, earth, fire. But out of each one, you're getting kind of like 3 spells as an example. I mean, there are a few of them in there, but then we get into part 3. This is essentially the guide book here. So this is going to be information that is devoted to the guide, talking about we've got some examples of some NPCs. We have examples of some creatures, both supernatural and mundane. So it's a bit of a bestiary. And there are some pretty cool protagonists or antagonists that are in here as well. We get some indexes, some additional optional rules here. One thing that I wish this contained was a starting adventure. There is no starting adventure in this book, and I'm very disappointed by that. And one of the reasons why is because so much of this game is kind of left to the devices of the players and the guide. I would have liked to have seen a just short example adventure to kind of give guides an idea of how to construct adventures for this game. There's some good tips in here as well. And then we've got the appendices, and this is going to give us some optional rules as well. And all in all, we've got 208 pages. Got our character sheet and our index. And that is what we find with Sigil and Shadow. So let's swing on over to the other camera because I'm going to share some final thoughts as well as my review score. So there's a lot that I like about Sigil and Shadow. I like the rules light. I like the mechanics. I kind of dig the rolling doubles is kind of a critical success if you've succeeded and a critical failure if you've failed. So I dig that. I like that. I like how the advantage you swap the dice around as opposed to rolling an additional die for the tens. So I like that. This is a nice set of mechanics that's very easy to jump into and start playing. As I mentioned before, we have seen these mechanics in other role playing games from Osprey. So if you have checked out, say, as an example, like Jackals, which is a Bronze Age fantasy role playing game, the mechanics are similar. Magic's different, but the core mechanics are quite similar. So I like it mechanically. I think production wise, the book is really well put together. There are some typos that I ran across. I was kind of surprised. Seeing it's Osprey Publishing, I was a little surprised by that. They're not, I'm not going to ding the score for it, but it was just something that I was a little surprised by. There's a lot of good tips and information in this book that you could utilize for other horror role playing games. Just so I point that out. As far as like the urban fantasy side to this, I don't see it as much as I do with the urban horror. As I mentioned already, if you like the whole setup for World of Darkness, but maybe you don't care for the game mechanics, this might be something that you want to take a peek at. So also have to mention that I'm really disappointed with the way the magic system is presented. Yes, there are a handful of spells, but I really don't care for the whole concept of the players and the guide get together and they have to hash out what these spells are going to do. And like I said before, in theory, it probably sounds okay. In execution, no. Tain't happening, Dooley. Also, I'm really disappointed that there's no starter adventure. There's no introductory adventure in this book. And one of the things that I have run across so far with these role-playing game releases from Osprey Games is there is no support. There's no follow-up. So we're getting some pretty cool role-playing games, but we're not getting adventure books. We're not getting any sort of supplemental material afterwards, except for Jackals. Jackals was the only role-playing game from Osprey Games that I'm aware of that has gotten any sort of follow-up support. So not even having an introductory adventure kind of leaves potential guides hanging. And I don't like that either. I think this is good enough to see Osprey provide some support for it. I'm just curious if we'll get to see that. I got to be very honest. I'm leaning towards probably not. It seems like Osprey is going in a direction of just releasing a lot of pretty cool role-playing games, but not providing any additional support. And I would love to see that change. I really would. All right. I do like this. I don't think it's fantastic. I got to say, I don't think it's a must-have. I think if you like horror role-playing games, if you're looking for a much lighter mechanical approach, this might be up your alley. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Sigil and Shadow a recommendation. I give it a 7 out of 10. I think it's decent. Like I said, I don't think it's a must-have. It doesn't need to be part of your collection, but it's still decent. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, ding that bell, because it'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs right here on YouTube Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. Central. as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news and first looks at tabletop games. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for plenty of tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you so much for taking time to watch this video. And until I see you next time, here's hoping you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang. Oh, you're still here. Well, while you're kicking it, how about subscribing to the Gaming Gang channel? Or seeing the latest episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch? Or finding out what YouTube recommends you check out here at my channel? And of course, don't forget, get your geek on at thegaminggang.com.